Thanks so much, Joel, for being here.
Happy to be here. Hey, guys.
Yeah, it's my first time seeing your new place from this camera. Joel is currently a software engineer at GovTech, where Joel is part of the small team that conceptualized the first version of TraceTogether back when COVID was just starting and we needed a solution for contact tracing. And Joel has since scaled the team and is now overseeing. I guess TraceTogether must be much bigger now, and there must be a lot more things going on. So we'd love to hear more about that. Joel, prior to TraceTogether, Joel was also working on other things at GovTech, which he can shed light on. And before GovTech, Joel was interning at a farming startup in San Francisco, building software for farmers in the US, and I'm guessing primarily to better manage their crop. Joel and I met while at Stanford through the Singaporean community at Stanford, and Joel was also studying computer science. And yeah, he's had various internship experiences in the US. And so Joel, just to give you some context about our students here, there are a mix of students from two batches. Our batch that started in January and our batch that started in April. So some of the students are roughly 4 to 5 months through the course, and the others are roughly 2 to 3 months through the course.
Cool.
Yeah, and everyone is a career switcher. Everyone is kind of entering the tech. I guess some people like Jerome were data analysts before, but most people are entering the tech industry for the first time and kind of anxious about, okay, what to expect, what to prepare, how do I get the best job, best entry level job. And so I think everyone's keen to hear your insights on all of this as well. Thanks so much for being with us.
Oh, happy to be here. How should we do this?
Maybe you can do a quick intro, and then we can open it up to questions.
Okay, sure.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, so I guess I'm not really a career switcher, but I did switch my majors in uni. I went to uni planning to study econ, and I really didn't like it. And I guess if you're doing on econ, they make you do all these maths, and I was okay doing math, but it felt like I didn't really want to do all the math and the basic assumptions about human behavior didn't even hold in real life. So it felt a bit pointless to me. And then I tried out different classes, psychology, CS, and I think computer science stuck because it felt like you could, build things that have a tangible impact on people's lives. I've been very interested in using technology for public good. I worked at a few companies doing dementia healthcare, doing healthcare software in developing countries. I spent 2 years, as Kai mentioned, working on this agriculture tech startup where we're trying to help farmers to be more sustainable and profitable. And in the past 3 years, 3+ years, I've been at GovTech, working on a bunch of different products. Most recently in the past year, I've been working on TraceTogether, which is interesting just to see the journey from something that's experimental and a prototype, trying to figure out how to use technology to help contact tracing, to, I guess, what it's grown into, MOH now wants to really scale it out. And I guess my journey has also been, going from a startup where I was on the founding team, and then the team was growing, but still a very small team, to at GovTech, joining first as an individual contributor, and then now as a tech lead. So yeah, happy to answer any questions y'all have. How should we start this? Y'all just want to
okay, yeah. No, students are always a little shy when we start, but it'll just take a few. Yeah, I'm gonna start talking now.
Okay, I'm just gonna go first. I wanted to wait till you share a bit more to us this, but I just wondering, because first question is pure curiosity. I was wondering what GovTech was doing before COVID, and what were you working on? Because I only know GovTech because of like COVID. That was I was wondering what was the beginnings of your journey there.
Yeah, so technology in government has changed a lot over the past few decades. GovTech was formed about 4 or 5 years ago, and I think the problem then was that at that point, a lot of the technology work in government was outsourced to vendors, And within government, there wasn't enough like technical expertise to like manage these vendors, and then we end up getting like held hostage by these vendors, right? Where you pay a lot and the code quality also isn't really there, and you don't really know how to manage them. And so that's when government started building in-house software engineering and being able to build software and design software. And since grown, like my team is called Government Digital Services. Is a group of about 300-400 people, software engineers, designers. The URL is hive.gov.sg if you want to find out more. But out of these 300-400 people, we're working on maybe more than 40-50 different products. You have everything from My Careers Future, which is this like a job search site, to the Go Business Portal, which is to help businesses, more easily apply for licenses, to something like mask wear, right? Some of these COVID things, to Open Certs, which is about putting some of these certs and stuff on the blockchain, so that it's easier to like verify. Yeah, there's like more than 40-50 different products. We still outsource, government still outsources a lot, but we choose to outsource those products that are a bit more straightforward. That, it makes sense to just let a vendor go and build something easy like a CRUD thing. But those that have more importance or the requirements are a bit more flexible, then we do it in-house where we can do the whole agile software engineering process. Yep.
Oh, cool. Okay. Thanks for sharing about that. I had no idea actually. It sounds like quite a fun place to work because it like you can just move inter-departments.
Yeah, I think the nice thing is that there's so many different products, and they're really very different. Like the technology stack is different, the problem domain is different, right? There's healthcare, there's education, there's so many different things, and the technology stack is different. It's not like many tech companies basically have one core product, and so you move around different things, but you're basically touching the similar code base. Whereas at GovTech, it's just so many completely different code bases. There's things that are very small and experimental. Like for example, they want to put these like trade documents on the blockchain. That one is small, experimental, trying it out, more like almost like a startup. Then you have your big, migration of a legacy system into a modern application thing, which maybe like 40-50 people. So there's a whole range of different kinds of projects, I would say, which can be quite interesting. Yeah.
Wow. Sounds like a lot. Okay. I guess I'm gonna segue into this question. Because I'm curious as to how I see that you've been in the industry for quite a while. I was wondering how your mindset has changed from like beginnings, when you first entered software engineering, your first job, till now, what was the growth like? What was mindset like? Quite curious.
What do you mean about mindset? Like mindset towards what?
Towards maybe like maybe you go in and you only know how to like you only know how to do like CRUD stuff, and then after that you realize that it's so much more than that. The growth of like a software engineer.
Just for context, we're currently doing some CRUD stuff.
Yeah, we're doing
in Portishead. Yeah.
Right.
I'm wondering
There's so many levels to that question. I think, there's many levels. On one level, I think you realize after a while doing software, it's not just about building your own thing, but ultimately software is about people, and it's about as a team, how do you make sure the feedback loops are there. I mean, having all the environment team, right, so that everyone can do their best work. Working with stakeholders. So there's also, I think software, back in school, I was very much writing my own code just to get assignments done, right? But once you come on the road, you realize, I feel like so much more of it is just about, a lot of times the challenges are maybe relating to people, and that's where, agile software engineering is interesting, because it's a lot of a mix of the people stuff and the technical stuff. Yeah. I think growth mindset is also very important, right, with software engineering, just because it is, I think, quite common, especially for people who are switching into CS, that when you see people better than you think, wow, they are very smart, or that somehow they are, somehow why are they so zai at computer science. But then it's important to have the growth mindset and realize, it takes time to become good, right, and to be willing to invest the time. And also not be afraid of looking silly or failing, because that's going to happen, and that's fine. But but yeah, just like continue to put in the time to try things and learn things. I think that's quite important. I think that it is very important throughout your career in the software. Yeah.
Okay.
Interesting. So it's like the people aspect is a big part of it, but also in terms of continued personal growth, right? Investing the time and trying new things and maybe failing, but also trying new things again. Cool.
Yeah, that's cool. Because I see your LinkedIn, like the companies that you have been at are like very people centric as well. They give back to the community a lot. And I feel that, is it on purpose that you picked this is what you chose? You chose to be in these companies because.
Yeah, I think that's something important to me, and I guess it's important to choose a role that you resonate with, like, and you want to wake up every day and go to work. And part of that is maybe having good people to work with, working on interesting things. But for me, I think the purpose part is also quite important, where I want to feel like what I'm building, is actually making a positive impact on people's lives. I did intern at a big tech company, where I guess sometimes it feels like a lot of the best minds in computer science are just spending their lives figuring out how to make people click on more ads. And that's very lucrative, making people click on more ads, but it just wasn't something that I was that interested in myself. And I feel like there's so many real world problems that technology could help make a difference in. That people haven't spent that much time. Like, for example, when I worked in Guatemala, I worked about a year on this healthcare software in Guatemala, and there's just so much low-hanging fruit there, right? There's so many problems that technology cannot completely solve, but technology can go a long way. Software can go a long way to help to solve and help to improve. And nobody was really working on these problems, and I thought I find it quite meaningful to work on these things. Yeah.
Okay. Awesome. Wow, that's good to hear actually. And I like that you don't want to work at a company that just for ads, just for profit.
I mean, not the ads are not. I mean, right, Google has, for example, Google has built a lot of great things funded by the ads of its own. So not to diss ads. I guess for me, it was important to be able to see people using a product and like benefiting from a product, and that was important to me, yeah.
Hi, Joe. Jerome here.
Hi, Jerome.
Yeah, thanks so much for your time. So actually, it's interesting. I was just looking at your, I think you were mentioning Yahoo, right? The big tech company.
Yeah.
I previously, in my past life, I did a bit of ad serving as well. So just really interesting to know that like you work on the system directly. So just wondering from your perspective of like solving like human problems, and like you said like some of the best minds go to ads and all that. Do you think it's an issue with like the kind of problem solving nature? Like I'm just thinking like to maybe create a cookie and tracker seems like it's very, very tough work compared to other kinds of problems where the problem solving nature may be different. I don't know. So just wanted to find out your perspective since you been like in like that side on both sides.
Yeah, I don't think the hardest problems are in ad serving. I imagine there are hard problems everywhere. I guess what's most relevant to me right now is TraceTogether, where for the past year it has been quite difficult to try to use Bluetooth, to try to use technology to help contact tracing. And it's like Bluetooth was just the thing that made the most sense because it kind of approximates proximity lah. So the virus cares about who you're nearby, and so Bluetooth is a rough measure of that. Bluetooth wasn't really designed for contact tracing, right? Bluetooth is designed for like listening to music and things like that. So then there's a lot of work that needs to go into how do you actually use Bluetooth to do accurate contact tracing, right? To make sure you're identifying the right people, the right close contacts lah. And so there's a lot of work that goes into the algorithm, into the trials, into making sure that we are not finding too many false positives or too many false negatives. I think there are problems everywhere.
Thanks. Sure.
Hey Joel, Ian here.
Hey Ian.
So we heard that you worked on the TraceTogether app. Like, could you tell us like stories about it or like some inside scoop about it? Like, for example, when they announced that TraceTogether would have been brought forward 1 month? Was it a scramble for the developer team? It's like, oh no, we got to like implement all this stuff now. Like how does it how does the development of the product work alongside like implementing government policy also? Yeah, as in just cool stories in general.
I think stories-wise, I mean, TraceTogether has just been has been a roller coaster in many ways. Yeah, I guess when we first started, it was just a random idea about trying to use technology to help contact tracing, and Bluetooth was one of other things that engineers were considering. So it quickly seemed the most promising thing, right? And this was, I think, in January 24th last year, Chinese New Year, when the first case happened in Singapore, and a few engineers started, prototyping this. I don't think we ever imagined what would have become of it, right? We saw it as a prototype. We were thinking this COVID thing is probably not going to be that serious anyway. Maybe it's like SARS, just a few months, it's going to die off. So we were thinking of just experimenting with this and maybe having it in the drawer, like something that could be helpful in future pandemic. But I guess and then we had the first prototype out within about 3-4 weeks, and we submitted it to the App Store and the Google Play Store. But actually, the first version got rejected by Apple because Apple is very strict about what you can use Bluetooth for, and there's a list of things you can use Bluetooth for, and I mean, contact tracing is not one of them, right? They had no idea what contact tracing was, and it wasn't until March when the situation got worse in the US. Then Apple says, oh, I realize, COVID is a thing, contact tracing is important, and then they allowed the app on the App Store. But when we released it to the country, it was still, very much, we weren't sure how useful this technology really is. So it's very much still experimental and trying it out. But I think as COVID got more serious and as MOH started using the data for their contact tracing, they realized, hey, this is very useful for me. I want to now scale this up to something that I want the whole country to use, especially when they go to high risk areas. So then that was a whole journey of working at MOH and just figuring out the whole contact tracing process too, right? Which is just a lot of honestly a lot of scrambling and a lot of just very quickly reacting to new knowledge about COVID, new knowledge about what the best practice for contact tracing is, and things like that. And I guess it's also very interesting, with the whole privacy bit, right? Like trying to figure out how to build privacy into the solution. Then also how to explain to people what these privacy safeguards are, which can be quite difficult to explain because they're quite technical. But yeah, it's been an interesting experience, like working from this prototype to something that now we are actively talking to other countries about, right? There are other countries that have been using the TraceTogether code base to launch their own products. Australia, Canada, Poland, a few countries. And then globally, like Bluetooth contact tracing, there's a lot of work on it right now. Yeah.
I just want to understand a bit more about you said that there was that transition when it started as like an experiment, and then it became like a full product with, I suppose you will start to have like, product managers, designers to be dedicated on this team. Like how was that transition? What was that transition like? Like, for example, the early sprint planning, and like how closely do you work with like researchers to inform the product?
So I think when it first started, the people working are all volunteers who were working on other full-time projects, right? I was working on another full-time project, and I was, working on this as just a part-time volunteer. And I think it shows to me also how important it is as an organization to have a bit of slack, right? So that people can try new things. And that's happened a few times at GovTech, including with some of our blockchain products, for example. So yeah, be able to try new things, work on something part-time, and then once it's promising, MOH is very promising, then we start scaling up. Sprint planning and things like that. Yeah, it was honestly, at the start, the team was working so closely together, right? Literally, we are in the office from like 9 a.m. to 1 a.m., 2 a.m. every single day, including the weekends, lunch and dinner on the weekends, because this was very much firefighting, so it's really like all hands on deck 24/7. So there wasn't really a need for sprint planning at that point because everyone's so in sync, like you're just literally all there together all the time. And TraceTogether was our lives, right, for a few months. But then, once you once the fire is out, then you have to figure out how to become more sustainable, right? And start implementing these like sprint planning processes, writing user stories, things like that. So that was a transition that the team had to make. Does that answer your question, Samantha?
Yeah, it does. Thank you.
Wow.
Joel, can you tell us more about your experience at the other companies that you've worked at in Silicon Valley, including the farming startup, and how is the work culture there similar or different to the work culture that you've been experiencing at GovTech?
So I spent 2 years on PastureMap, which was the farming startup, agri-tech startup. The culture there, I mean, it was a very small team. We had, I was the first engineer, but then we grew to a team of, maybe only about 4 or 5 engineers. I think one thing that surprised me at GovTech is that there were many elements that were quite similar. For example, in terms of the autonomy, it's not as much as the startup, but it's quite comparable, right? Autonomy in terms of being able to choose what I want to work on, being able to choose the kind of tech stack, with new product. I think GovTech is very big on empowering engineers to make decisions on how to build things, and so then there's a lot of autonomy there. Another area that was similar was also the culture-wise. It's quite flat. I know there's a bit overused the word, but even though my division at GovTech is 300 or 400 people, ultimately work in small teams of 5 to 10 to 20 people. And so everyone, is able to, day to day, nobody really tells you what to do, right? There's alignment among the team, but not what needs to get done. And every day people just pick up whatever needs to get done. And if any problems, just talk to other people. There's no, it doesn't feel very hierarchical, and decision making is very decentralized. So in those ways it's similar. I think the differences, one advantage of being in Silicon Valley is just that there are a lot more experienced people to work with, right? We hired people at PastureMap who had 10 plus years experience at Twitter, Google, and it's hard to find, it's hard to get the amount of mentorship and learning just in the Singapore tech scene. But then you just have to find the learning in other ways, right? Whether it's tech sharings among the team, or just spending time on going for courses and learning things. Yeah. I think another difference is also just that at GovTech, it's nice that I don't have to worry about monetization. I mean, obviously a startup is something you think about, right? Runway, monetization, right? And that can be quite worrying. Right? Runway, right? And then you have to talk to investors, and then GovTech, it's not to say that I can completely 100% focus on the product, but there's a bit less of that. I have more time to focus on just building a product that improve people's lives. Right? There is still red tape and some bureaucracy, but I feel like I can better focus on the things.
What are KPIs like then? So if there's pretty flat structure and people aren't telling you what to do, then how are engineers especially measured in terms of their performance?
Yeah. Honestly, that's something GovTech has been working on. Right now, it's very decentralized. And for example, my director who leads the team of 100 plus of us, when it comes to promotion season, for example, we do promotions by peer nomination. So we vote who. Everything is transparent. We can see everybody's grades. Grades as in the job grade they're at, and then you basically vote who you think is performing at a higher grade than others in the grade. I think this person is performing at the next level already, then I vote for them.
So there's a public list of different levels. Is that something that's open to the public that we can look at? Or
this is
levels.
Right. No, this is a list of every staff in the team and what level they're at. So then it's just public within the team, so that we can refer to it when we're.
Got it. So there isn't a document which is okay, this grade means that you need to be able to achieve X, Y, Z, and the next grade up, we need to be able to achieve the next or something else.
Yeah, that's something that's in progress, work in progress at GovTech. I think many tech companies have something that's a bit more systematized like this. GovTech is a bit more challenging just because of how decentralized things are and how different every team is.
Yeah.
It's a work in progress to like come up with these like standardized job grades. Yeah.
Got it. Okay. Cool.
How many bands are there in total for?
How many what?
How many bands are there like for individual contributors?
I think there's about from a entry level that comes in, which usually is about grade D, then we have E, F, G, H. By a grade I, we expect the person to play a tech lead role, and so maybe about 5 bands. Yeah, at more senior levels, there are people who continue to be individual contributors, but there's naturally a encouragement to play a tech lead role, especially at GovTech, because there aren't as many senior people, and so it's, there's nudging to play a more tech lead role. But there are senior people who continue to play an individual contributor role too, if that's what they prefer. Yeah.
Well,
Just curious, I heard you mention like individual contributors like a couple of times. So like, are these people like free floating? Like they're not in any team in particular?
I think I meant that more. So I think individual contributor is a common term in tech industry as juxtaposed against engineering manager, or as a manager. So basically the idea is, at a certain point in a person's career, sometimes they choose like whether they want to continue being an individual contributor, which means that you spend a lot more time, continuing to work on code, versus being a manager where maybe you spend a bit less time on code and more on people management. GovTech is a bit of a hybrid actually, where a lot of the more senior engineers, we call them tech leads, so they don't fully do management, but so they still do coding on a day-to-day basis, maybe about 20-30% of the time. Then the rest of the time is like helping the team to unblock any challenges they have, mentoring, helping in code reviews, architecture, things like that. Yeah.
Joel here.
Yes, hi Joe.
Thanks for joining us. I actually wanted to understand that when a company chooses a tech stack, like what they're using, what set of languages and the supporting library they use, what are the deciding factor? Like, is it dependent on the market they serve in, or how futuristic they are, or how they want to scale up?
I think the different considerations, I mean, a big one will actually be the team and the kind of expertise the team has, right? There's no point choosing something if the team is not interested in it and doesn't have any experience or doesn't want to learn it, and there's no point choosing it. So the team's preference is one consideration. The other considerations tend to be around the kind of needs you have in the product. Like some products, you want to be able to iterate very quickly, move very quickly. Maybe other products you are very worried about error handling. You want to make sure that security is watertight. So for example, when we were working on a product that synthesized data from many government agencies and brought them together. In that product, we were very worried about data leaks, right? And we were also conscious that there's so many different integrations. And so we decided to pursue like a microservice approach. And when you do a microservice approach, it makes sense to have lightweight services. And so then we chose Golang because Golang, the security record was good. The error handling was quite solid. It was good for the microservice architecture. So basically these considerations come in like the kind of requirements, both feature-wise and also non-functional requirements that you have in the product. And then looking at what languages and frameworks are a better fit for this. Yeah. Does that answer your question, Joe? Or do you have any follow-up questions?
Actually, yeah, it does to some extent, because that's the point regarding the team preference also matter. Answers it. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, and honestly, with these things, I mean, you're going to see many people who choose something and then find all these reasons to justify why they choose something. Sometimes people just have certain preferences. And sometimes it's quite common, right? Human decision making, you end up having the answer in your head and you just find all these reasons to support it. And I mean, you can probably find a lot of reasons to support anything you want to choose. But there are probably, so I mean, out of the set of so many different things you choose from, there's probably going to be a narrow set of things that make sense. Then within those set of things that make sense, then it's really up to, I think, preferences. Yeah.
Thanks.
How did you overcome imposter syndrome? Like you were saying earlier, when you were switching majors, right? You might have found that okay, other people are a lot faster or better. How did you kind of convince yourself that okay, I'm good and I can do this?
That's a good question. I don't know. I think imposter syndrome continues to. I don't know. Honestly speaking, it will recur. I mean, I talk to people who continue, and I myself also say sometimes, am I? There is a feeling of imposter syndrome from time to time. I don't know if you I don't know if it's something you fully overcome. It's more like, okay, you realize that I can put in time and get better, and then you try to develop the way of approaching things to be able to learn, be able to pick things up, and you see yourself progress and pick things up. Yeah, I think growth mindset is hard. It's hard to actually wrap. I found it hard to actually wrap my head around growth mindset and to actually try to live it day to day. I feel like a lot of my education in my younger days was very like fixed, where I always had a sense of some people are better at this, better than that. I would sense that I'm not good at this, and so then be able to get in the mindset where if I'm not good at it, being able to find strategies to learn it, or to approach it and to have to find a staircase to get better at things. That doesn't mean you can get good at everything, but have that approach where you are able to find that staircase to get the things. I think that was it's something that needs to be practiced, and something that is useful to practice to overcome imposter syndrome. Yeah.
Right, like small, maybe like have small wins, right?
Yeah.
Like set yourself this small goal and then achieve it, and then set yourself a slightly bigger goal and see if you can achieve it.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Interesting. And for our students that are kind of learning coding and software engineering for the first time, how should people think about specialization? Because we've had a couple questions in the past about, okay, should I be learning blockchain? Should I be learning cybersecurity? Should I be learning AI? And at Rocket Academy, we try to teach people the foundations around, what are the various components of building an app, rather than focus on any of these specializations. And I'm curious to hear your thoughts on when is a good time to specialize, and as entry-level software engineers, should we even be thinking about specializing, or should we just try and do the broadest thing possible? What would be your thinking around that?
Yeah, I think that depends a lot on the kind of person you are too. Like, I think for me, I'm very much driven by like seeing the outcomes or seeing the impact of the product, and because that's what I care about, then it makes more sense for me to be a generalist. Like, there's certain things I'm better at, but ultimately, I am able to work through the whole stack and understand make decisions across the stack. So people who are a bit more motivated by maybe the geeky details of a certain thing, or you want to go deep into certain things, then maybe it makes sense to specialize, in very deep into understanding security or AI. But I wouldn't say I would agree. I don't think that makes sense, early on in the career. I think you still need the broad fundamentals, right? Need to know, like, even if you go deep into security, you should first know, overall how to build an app or how an app works. And that is those fundamentals are important before you then try different things, and then if you want to specialize, you can choose to specialize. Yeah. Yeah.
And as like an entry-level engineer, right, should we be thinking about, okay, do I like front end and back end better? In which case, maybe I'll apply for a front end role or a back end role, or should we just generally try to find generalist, like full stack software engineering roles to start with? Any thoughts around that?
I think personally, I am a fan of being a generalist with certain areas of that, like a T, right? Like you have, I think that the broad horizontal of the T is important, but then maybe have certain areas where you're a bit better at. And at GovTech, we try to encourage like cross-functional teams where within the team, within the team, you have people from all the different roles, right? There's testing, security, software, product, design. But then also the other part of the cross-functional teams is also like each individual, we encourage them to both have a primary role, but also maybe a secondary role, right? So maybe someone who really likes front-end engineering, but also interested in design, they can take it as a secondary role as a designer and do a bit of the design stuff. Some people do a bit of backend, a bit of DevOps. And we encourage that flexibility across the stack. And I think that generally helps teams to firstly be more like adaptive to what needs to be done in the current moment, right? And secondly, it also just helps the team be a bit more cohesive. So instead of having silos where, that is your problem, that's your problem, everyone can kind of chip in to do whatever needs to get done.
And how do you all split your time? Let's say like someone has a primary role and a secondary role. Like how does that person split their time on their primary versus secondary? Is it a strict number of hours or kind of a bigger and a smaller project, or how does that work?
I guess at least in division, I mean, people mostly work on one project at a time. So I think it would be more like sprint by sprint, looking at the kind of work that needs to be done in the sprint. And the person would, like even an engineer could maybe spend the whole sprint doing design if that's what the team needs.
Okay.
The engineer wants to do that. Yeah.
Got it. So it's by sprint, basically like some sprints they'll choose to do the primary thing, other sprints they'll do the secondary thing.
Yeah, but some things it makes sense to do together also. Like if you're doing backend and DevOps, for example, that's a common combination. And then it makes sense that, it makes sense that for DevOps, I mean, it's a bit of a culture where you want everyone to be kind of familiar with deployment, but then there'll be some people within the team who have a bit more subject matter expertise in DevOps, and they will be the ones to solve any more difficult deployment or CI/CD problems that the team has. And that's concurrent with the backend engineering role.
Nice.
Follow-up question on that. What would you say is your subject matter expertise, and what are you currently interested in to learn more about?
I think where I have a bit more experience would be software architecture, like designing the architecture both on the systems infrastructure level and also the code level, for some of the projects I've worked on at GovTech. I think in my current roles, I do a lot of code reviews. And so being able to give feedback to the team, being able to, help the team think about the impact of their code in the longer term, right? Because I think that tends to be a area where more junior engineers will need some experience with them. Because unless you're just starting coding, you don't realize that if I code this thing a certain way, there are certain long-term implications that makes it less maintainable or whatever.
What are some of the common things that you observe in those reviews?
I think a lot of it is around abstracting at the right level. You don't want to. I mean, the more you don't want to completely not abstract, right? And then the code becomes messy and it's the logic is everywhere. But then sometimes you over abstract, then that also ends up being a flaw, because then that makes it harder. Or if you abstract at the wrong levels, then sometimes it's hard to change the business logic in the future in the areas where it needs to be changed, right? It's a bit like over optimization where that can be quite a harmful thing also. And so finding the right balance and abstracting and optimizing. Sam, does that answer your question? Do you have any follow-up question?
Just the second part about what are you currently learning? What interested in?
I've been trying to go deeper into different security things, like better understanding different kinds of security vulnerabilities, trying out some pen testing on my own. I think it's out of interest, so out of recognition that it's important for security to be part of the engineering process, right? I think in the industry, there's a lot of talk about shifting left, so shifting things left, right? So previously, a lot of the times you would build a product, then after you do your penetration testing, then you discover issues, then you go and fix it. And then the feedback loop is just, it's not so good, right? Because you finish assembly, then you discover flaws, then you're not having to rework things. And so the idea of shifting left is then can you try to build in these different considerations into your initial architecture, into the way you build the code day to day. Things like security, things like testing, do it day to day and shift it left, rather and DevOps, do it day to day rather than leaving it as a separate thing that's done at the end. So security is something I'm going a bit deeper into. I guess the past year also,
By left, you mean like to the beginning of the development workflow, right?
workflow. Yeah.
Okay.
Cool, thank you.
Effie, Xin, Michelle.
Yeah, I think most of my questions were answered already.
Hmm.
I had a
Awesome.
question like, how do you separate a junior to a senior developer? So
Hmm.
it's 2 points ago, he answered that.
Awesome.
Yeah. Okay.
One of the common questions that we get is, what is the interview process like at the company, so at GovTech in this case, and how does it screen for the types of candidates that GovTech is looking for?
I think the kind of candidates are looking for, I think there'll be a few areas, right? Technical expertise, which comes out through the technical assessment and coding challenges, technical communication, so being able to explain technical ideas. Because at GovTech we have to work with stakeholders sometimes and be able to explain things, technical ideas. So I think learning agility is really important, right? Having a candidate who demonstrates, that they have a history of like learning things and they're able to pick new things up, because just in industry things change so quickly, right? You want people who are able to learn. And at more senior levels, when we look at things like decision making and ability to think about technical trade-offs. But at more junior levels, I think the most important thing is the learning agility and some decent level of technical expertise, technical communication, and also just being driven and taking initiative. I think that's quite important for a more junior engineer.
What about education background? Like, would he like having no degree and stuff like that? Is it a big factor though to get in?
Not really.
Like, is it a blocker?
No, it's definitely not a blocker. Yeah, it doesn't really come up to the through the application process, right? Like as long as the technical assessments, a person performs well, interview performs well. I don't think the exact.
But what helps get a candidate through the first door?
So
say he doesn't have a bootcamp, right? Like his LinkedIn account or his portfolio, his resumes, everything is just self-taught. Would that?
I think evidence of projects like if there's no formal education background, then there has to be evidence of projects you've done at boot camps, at just evidence of like picking up on yourself, like being able to do things, right? And so links to the projects, so those are very helpful. Yeah.
What about tattoos?
Sorry?
Doesn't count as coding, Effie. Sorry. Yeah, doesn't count.
Oh man.
Yeah. Unless you coded those tattoos, that would be.
You can try, yeah, that'd be cool.
Yeah.
Computerally generated, yeah. Tattoos.
Oh, that's impressive. Yeah, that would get you hired. Yeah.
Joe, what are some qualities you found, like, let's say in yourself, that you felt like, that you would like, for the people that you're mentoring or whatever, that you hope you could pass on? Just generally your approach, in your how many years of career, software engineering? Yeah. Just generally, yeah. Or maybe as well.
I think the growth mindset part I talk is a big part of it, the approach of learning. I think humility and like, I think especially at GovTech, there is like, especially at GovTech, for more senior engineers, then you're working with a lot of stakeholders, right? Or GovTech is like government technology is basically a whole area that's in transition, right? Like we used to do things a certain way. A lot of people in the government are still used to doing things a certain way, and so approaching the attitudes not with impatience and disdain, but with curiosity and with a genuine, like compassion, also like understanding where they're coming from, right? I think that is quite important. Like it's important in general. I think I think ultimately a lot of software engineering is a people endeavor, right? It's people getting together, writing code together. And in large software engineering projects, there's so many people trying to work together at the same time. And so I think being able to pay attention to different people's perspectives, being able to sit in other people's perspectives, is important. Yeah.
That's a question. So for GovTech, where does your project ideas come from? Is it from other government divisions? Or do you guys have your own projects?
Yeah, I think it comes from both places. Like a lot of it is like, a ministry come to us with a certain problem, then they want us to build a solution to the problem. And another group of it is like engineers who are hacking together on things. They find something promising and then they sell to they find ministries who want to like sponsor it. The engineers hacking together one, I mean, the examples would be things like, TraceTogether was also, engineers hacking. There are also things like OpenCert or TradeTrust, which is the group of engineers who were really interested in blockchain and trying to find applications for it, right? And they found ministries. They found certain applications that made sense, and the ministry was also interested, and they kind of grew it from there. Then the other category, I think the larger category is just ministries coming to us with problems and things that they want to solve. And then how it starts is usually they come with a certain problem. We have user researchers who try to understand the problem better, right? Try to understand the pain points that users are currently having. Then maybe build a bit of prototypes and try to figure out what the best solution to the problem is. And there's some examples where, like for example, there was a My Responder. And so I think the SCDF came to GovTech with a problem where, can you do data science? Can you help us to get the ambulances to people more quickly, right? And our role at GovTech is also not to directly immediately build the solution, but to better understand the problem and see whether there are other solutions to the problem. And so the solution that the team came up with is, why not we try to crowdsource, right? Because it's ultimately there's always going to be it's going to take some time for the ambulance to reach the person. So why not we try to get people who are nearby who may be CPR trained, to be able to go and help the person. So having this My Responder app where a lot of like CPR trained people sign up to the app, and if there's somebody in the area who needs it, they get a ping on their phone. So things like that where we find the best solution and try to use technology to unlock a whole new like class of solutions, right? That may not be immediately apparent at first. Yeah.
I see. Thank you.
And just to follow up on that, like a lot of people, when they think of software engineers, they think of more or less like Code Monkey, right? But Code Monkey, may not necessarily like who in the team. Let's say if SCDF came with that idea, who in the team would be the people to do the prototyping, right? Figure out the user needs. Is that a product manager, or are the software engineers actually involved with that, or how does that? What's the involvement of? Is it just building the product, or is there more user-centric work there as well?
Yeah, I would say some software engineers would. For me, I would be interested in working, so I do that kind of work. But I think it's important not to be a code monkey and not to only just do whatever whatever you're told to do, because then those jobs are very easy to outsource, right? And very easily hire someone cheaper somewhere else to just do whatever they're told. And I think the value add comes from taking initiative, whether it's like working with the stakeholders to try to really understand what needs to be built, or taking initiative technically also, like trying to figure out what about team processes can be improved, the architecture, and those things. I mean, it's something that once you start your career, then you have to start thinking about, right? How do I take initiative and like value add to the team? And I think that's also the reason behind the increase in software engineering pay throughout the years, right? Because it's also the responsibilities and the kind of expectations have increased, and you see kind of a bifurcation, right? I'm sure many people are familiar in software engineering salaries, where you still have a low end, more contract agency model where you're just supposed to do as you're told, and then that's one cluster of software engineers. And if you want to move up to a higher cluster, you kind of need to go beyond just that line and think about how to solve the problems of the team, find the right solution, things like that.
Yeah, could you remember some of the questions that you were asking as a junior software engineer, like looking for jobs, to your hiring managers, and what are some of the things that you're looking out for, as you were applying? Other than the tech for good part, like them interested.
I think that I was interested in like the kind of practices, like I wanted to join somewhere where they have good software engineering practices, like okay, they do testing, they have a CI/CD pipeline in place. I think Joel Spolsky has a Joel test of like you can go Google it, of like, I don't know, 10 different questions that you should ask to get a sense that okay, this outfit takes engineering seriously, and you want to join the place that takes engineering seriously, so that you can develop your skill a bit more. Right? You don't want to join something where everything's kind of on fire and nobody really cares about the quality of the code, and it's just about churning out features, because then you don't really get to grow so much as a software engineer. And yeah, you don't get to learn how to do things right. So I think that was important to me, like trying to figure out whether that place cared about these things. Yeah, I think a lot of junior engineers will also ask like, oh, whether I can get mentorship or things like that. I think it's hard to, many places it's hard to get very explicit kind of mentorship. But I guess you want a place where also it's welcoming, and you're able to learn from your peers as a junior engineer. I really enjoyed I liked that my first project at GovTech, there was a big culture of like pair programming. Like basically everything was done pair programming. And that really helps, like people to teach each other. And that was helpful as a junior engineer.
Joel, earlier we were talking about the interview process when you were saying we were looking at for expertise, communication, and agility. Like, how does the interview process tease out those things? And like how does GovTech evaluate technical expertise or communication or learning agility?
I think one caveat is that at GovTech, the hiring process will differ depending on the team that you're applying for, because it's very decentralized. But in general, what happens is that the first round will be like a technical screen that you do online, and that gives a sense that okay, you can at least write code, which will be surprised not every candidate can do.
So it'd be like an algorithms kind of question, that kind of thing.
Sometimes algorithms, sometimes more building something, but more of a hygiene factor kind of thing usually. So that would be the initial screen, then the in-person, or nowadays the Zoom one would be, both would be a role interview, and then also a technical in-person technical challenge, like pair programming. And I guess the in-person one is where you look for things like technical communication, someone who's driven, takes initiative, and through the coding assessment, you get a sense of like technical expertise and whether they have they're able to write relatively clean code, whether they're able to break down the ideas and break down the solutions to figure out how to solve a problem. Things like that.
How about learning agility?
I think that tends to happen just by talking to them and asking them like, what you're learning right now, what have you learned recently.
Cool. Awesome. All right. Any other thoughts or questions for Joel? Jeff and Michelle, you guys have anything? No? Cool. Okay. I think we will maybe we'll wrap it up here. But last question, Joel, before we break. Right. So given everyone here is a career switcher, Akira, do you have any thoughts for Joel before we break? Questions or thoughts?
Maybe I was just personally curious, because I would be curious to know a little bit more about TraceTogether, like in terms of maybe you should have a little bit more time. Maybe some specific, like maybe something more specific about the engineering around the system, like maybe one of the highs or lows of the roller coaster.
The engineering. I think there were a few decisions made, right? Like number one, storing data on people's devices rather than storing it in the cloud was a big one. Also, I think the challenge there is also really how to explain. Like, it's how to explain to people that, hey, actually there's a big difference between when the data is stored on your device versus stored on the cloud. It's also hard for people to verify. But yeah, there's a big decision, right? Figuring out how to encrypt the messages so that, you know, any anonymous malicious actor cannot sniff it and get your identity, you know, rotating the messages so that, because even if you anonymize it, if you keep advertising the same message, a malicious actor can still kind of track you, right, wherever you go. And so rotating it every, you know, 10, 15 minutes. I guess
when you say you mean like the signature of the device.
Yeah, whatever the device is, like broadcasting to other devices, you know, that gets
Right.
changed every 10, 15 minutes so that if somebody's trying to track you over time, they won't be able to associate a certain identifier with you. Yeah, some of these details. I guess it was interesting working with Apple and Google. So after we came out, you know, we went from Apple not accepting the app on the App Store to Apple then wanting to build their own contact tracing APIs, right? So working with Apple and Google and trying to figure out how to get the APIs or get features in APIs that MOH needed, which ultimately was unsuccessful, but it was an interesting process trying to work with them and you know, also seeing the different considerations they have because they're building these APIs not just for the Singapore government, but also for governments around the world who other countries maybe slightly different, you know, government state dynamics and also government citizen dynamics and also different levels of government intrusion or surveillance. That was interesting, yeah.
So you were interfacing directly with someone at Apple, like the iPhone device API, some part of the device API.
Yeah, we're working at Apple and Google on the exposure notification APIs that they released. Yeah, which ultimately didn't meet MOH needs for certain technical reasons, but that was an interesting process. Yeah.
Cool.
I guess the fun fact was they do a lot of very deep Bluetooth testing and engineering at Apple, right? A funny story that they had was they were talking about AirPods and how they do a lot of testing to make sure the AirPods can be in sync so the Bluetooth connection is stable. And they said that one demographic where the AirPods struggled the most was Italian men. And this is apparently because Italian men have a lot of gel, and gel is very bad for Bluetooth. It kind of gets the Bluetooth out of sync. It's a cute story. Yeah.
How does that work? Why is gel bad? Cannot transmit through the gel, is it?
I guess so, yeah.
Okay, interesting. Okay, Joe, would you have any last advice for our career switchers here who are entering the industry for the first time, going through the bootcamp, working really hard, but a little nervous about the interviews?
You guys have an exciting journey ahead of you. And I mean, you guys are really good teachers here with Kai and Akira. And so, yeah, all the best with your journey. Keep learning, keep being hungry.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Joel.
Cool.
Thanks for being with us.
Have a good rest of the week. Bye, guys.
Okay, have a good one. See you.